Hello, my name is Andrew, and today we're doing a comparison between the best winter barefoot casual boots, the Barefoot GOBI warmlined, and the realfoot Trekker High. So let's start out with the GOBI. This is my favorite from last year, just because it's so lightweight and flexible. It's actually really warm, especially if you stack up some socks and insoles in there, which we'll talk about. But yeah, just looking at the toe box, this is actually one of the wider Vivo styles, which is nice because a lot of them can be a little bit more slim. And this one does have a little bit of taper towards the tip, but one of the nice things about it is that if you open up the laces here, it actually starts to get towards extra wide, because you can see here there's really no limitation. The rubber is really flexible, whereas some shoes that kind of have like a stiffer leather and stiffer rubber, it's kind of like what you see is what you get, you know? So I really like that. I find that I can stack up, you know, like 2, sometimes 3 pairs of socks, depending on how thin they are, plus like an insole in there. So ton of room, some good volume here. Above the toes, it can get a little slim if you start stacking up too much in there, but overall, a lot of room. It's got kind of a sneaker vibe up here with the laces, but then you've got 2 quick release hooks on the top for getting it on and off really quickly. Another thing I like about this style is that you can really open it up and it's easy to slip on and off, you know? They don't have a zipper yet, which I think would be really cool if they added to the side. I think that would just be like a knockout at that point, you know? It'd just be like the perfect boot. But anyways, I just like that you can open them up, because sometimes when you have like a higher cut boot, it's really hard to get in and out, you know? So that's a nice feature. And they have a synthetic puffy wool here. Usually I don't like synthetic as much, but this one's really breathable. There's lots of airflow that goes around in there just because there's so much puffiness to the fabric, and I find the temperature regulation, moisture wicking is really good with this as well. The upper is leather. It's got a bit of sheen, which is nice for water resistance, because the water just kind of flows right off of it, and they're not completely waterproof, but I've taken them out in the rain and slush and puddles and stuff like that, and you know, it takes a lot to get these to actually soak through, which is great. And then when they do finally get a little bit damp inside, the lining helps a lot in terms of wicking that moisture away, like I said. They've also cut this dip here, so I find they bend really nicely. There's no kind of hard parts on the top of the boot, which is important for casual if you're gonna wear it around like walking in the city all day. The side of the rubber comes up quite high, which is another thing I like. It helps, you know, when you're going through puddles and stuff like that, if you don't have a boot that's completely waterproof, at least if the rubber sole is high, like you're probably not gonna be walking through puddles that are thicker than this, but they also have a secondary layer that wraps around with the leather, which helps as well. I also like the height of this boot, you know, like it's high, but not too high where it starts to feel really hot, you know, if you take it indoors. It's also got a stitched sole all the way around, which is great for durability. And then in terms of the sole, it's 3.7 millimeters, so super flexible. This is one of the thinnest soles that Vivo Barefoot has. You can twist it like a pretzel. I like the tread pattern. It's got this kind of hex shape, and it provides some pretty good grip on slippery conditions. Obviously, nothing is gonna save you on black ice. You know, there's just not enough for any sole really to grip on, but this is pretty good in terms of wet conditions, you know, if it's like rainy and cold, stuff like that. And then the rubber, you know, it is thin at 3.7 millimeters, but it has a little bit of toughness to it, so I can take these on gravel. Like I usually walk with these every single day in the winter going out to the grocery store, and there's like a little section, you know, where there's some small gravel and stuff like that, and that's fine for this sole. In terms of going hiking, you know, you could go on like dry dirt and that's also fine. But if you're trying to go on like steep muddy hills or like really gnarly rocks, you know, that's probably not the best use for this sole, because it is a casual boot, but it does feel amazing walking on roads. And a couple of things I like to do is wear Injinji merino wool toe socks, and they spread out your toes, which is great for airflow, but they're also moisture wicking, temperature regulating, antimicrobial. So they smell really good, and they just improve the breathability and the warmth inside the boots. Sometimes I'll stack up like a thicker smart wool over top of that if it's really cold. Like I've gotten these boots down to 0 degrees, which is crazy, you know, for such a light boot. But if you're in really wet conditions, Vivo also ships this insole. This is their thermal insole. It's got kind of like a space blanket layer to it. And the nice thing about that is that if it's really wet, it creates like a seal, you know, where if moisture does get into the boot, it just keeps it from soaking up into your socks. It has a little more structure, which also can be nice if you're doing like faster paced walking or going down hills, because it prevents the insole from sliding around in there like a wool felt insole can. I really like to use these, you know, when it's like dry, cold, because just like the socks, you know, temperature regulating, moisture wicking, antimicrobial, which is the great thing about wool, but you know, if you're on a hill, it can do this. Moving on to the Real-Foot Trekker High. This is a new one for this year, and I really love the style. I think the cutout on the back is nice, both, you know, like visually and just because it's soft, you know, it gives you lots of flexibility on the top of the boot. It's kind of a similar cut, sort of like medium high, like the Gobi, which again, I think is great. You know, it's slanted in the back a little bit, lots of flexibility, just like the Gobi. But it has an extra wide toe box, which is really nice for toe splay. I remember the first time I tried Real-Foot and I thought like, this is just too much, you know, because my feet look like this and a lot of people's feet look like this, but I don't know, it's actually like really nice. I don't necessarily need the width, but there are a few things I like about it. And one of them is that you just get more airflow in there, which is really nice. Like wet days, super cold days, there's also more room in there, you know. You can see that there's a ton of volume, and so you can stack up the socks kind of like the Gobi, but you know, you can get even more in there. I can get like, you know, smart wool plus Injinji, and then maybe even like another layer of Injinji. So yeah, it might be a little bit less if you have actually extra wide feet, you know, but this is nice to have because there aren't a lot of brands that make truly extra wide boots. And once you start wearing them, you don't really notice it, especially when it's like down, you know, where your feet are. If you're holding it right up next to you, you know, it makes the toe box look a little bit bigger, but then, you know, when you're back here, it looks a little more like a normal boot. But I love the style. I think the green color is probably one of my favorite barefoot boot designs of all time. They also have this really squishy tongue, which I love. It's got some nice padding for your tendon that's rubbing up there so the laces don't dig in. They've got these fabric lace locks here so you can get the adjustment or the snugness the way that you want it, and then 2 quick release hooks here like the Gobi. These ones don't hold quite as well. I think the Gobi kind of has the same problem, and Real-Foot has a boot called the Farmer Winter, which has some better ones that sort of like snap into place, so hopefully they might replace these next year, but you know, not a big deal. Another difference is that it has this extra strap here just for a little bit more durability and support, but you know, it's kind of like a lightweight hiking boot, so you don't need a ton of support or anything. But kind of like the Gobi, they've got an extra layer of leather on here, which helps when you're going through wet grass, you know, just that extra protection, because this is usually the part of the boot that gets wet, you know. In terms of the sole, it doesn't wrap up quite as high as the Vivo Gobi does, but this is actually okay because it has a water resistant membrane, and this stuff is really good. I'd never heard of it before. I think it's called T-Por, T-E-P-O-R. And it's an interesting combination because it's very water resistant, but then it's also perforated. You can see the little holes there, and the breathability is quite good for synthetic. In terms of the sole, it's 4 millimeters, so just a little bit thicker than Vivo, but they feel very similar. They're both extremely comfortable on roads, especially when you add just a little bit of softness inside the boot, you know, for being on concrete or pavement. But it's got a little bit different tread pattern. It's slightly more trail oriented. I would say just a little bit more durable, but they're very similar. And also, like Vivo, has some good grip to it. It's not gonna save you on black ice, like I said, but one nice thing about having the extra wide toe box is there's more surface area, you know? So the more surface area you have, the more you're gonna grip on slippery conditions. And like when I've been walking across this slippery boardwalk, which I have to go to get to the path that I take to the grocery store, I just find myself not slipping at all on these, and it's been really nice because that's a place where I've wiped out in the past. Another interesting thing about Real-Foot is that even though they have an extra wide toe box, they're a little more slim in the midfoot. It doesn't really matter too much. It's not tight because you can open up the boots as much as you want, and then the side of the shoe, kind of like the Gobi, is very flexible, so there's really no limitation there. But I think it just makes the boot look a little bit more palatable to someone that wants like a regular shape, you know, because you've got a lot of room up here, but then it gets a little bit more standard towards the back, which is nice. Also, another feature that's great is the gusseted tongue. And so you can get these up to like here, you know, in water without the water coming in. If you just wait around, you know, for quite a while, then it'll eventually soak in. But if you're just doing like a quick splash, through a stream or something like that, the water resistance is really good, and that's something that the Gobi doesn't do because Vivo Barefoot separated the tongue. One benefit for that is that it does increase breathability just a little bit. When you have a gusseted tongue, you know, there's less room for the air to escape, but you know, these are really nice for wet, sloppy, disgusting conditions. All right, so those are the pros and cons of the Vivo Barefoot Gobi Warmlined and Realfoot Trekker High, but if you'd like to support the channel, you can shop the referral links down below, browse and filter more products with the shoe finder tool at my website barefootwear.org, or watch my zero drop transition video to learn more about barefooting. Finally, if you have a question about the Vivo Barefoot Gobi Warmlined or the Realfoot Trekker High, or about barefoot shoes in general, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, catch you next time, peace.